Here again. I will be posting this on Saturday, like I told you guys. So I hope you're having a great 3-day weekend. Um, we're going to continue our chapter 15 notes. This is our second week of that. We are moving into World War II next week. So this is really the setup of World War II. But to understand World War II, we needed to understand the Great Depression and the fear it brought, and then the governments that came out of the Great Depression, especially in Europe, called fascism or a fascist government. You may have heard this word a lot. We're going to talk about what fascism is, how it came to power in Europe, and how it would lead to World War II. So we're going to go right to the brink of World War II. So for all you guys that have been so excited about going to World War II, please watch this video so you can understand how we got there. It's gonna better help you fill out these PowerPoint checks because I've been looking at them and a lot of you guys are skipping through slides and not actually doing it. Please watch this video. It's like 20 minutes. I promise you it'll help your grade a ton. Our EQ is on our first slide. We're going to talk about totalitarianism and fascism in Europe. So, what is fascism? I think before we even go into understanding anything, we need to know what fascism is. So, fascism is a term that was started by a guy in Italy named Mussolini, who we will talk about later. But a fascism country is sort of like a monarchy where there's a king. Only what binds a fascist government is the idea that my country is better than your country, and that anything your country does isn't even good enough because my country's better. So, for example, in Italy, they had a leader named Mussolini who was the fascist leader, and he would say that my country is so great that I should take over every other country and make sure that my power is stronger than everybody else. It is sort of like communism because they use terror to control their people. So if you do not like the fascist leader, then you die. Um, Also, if you are in government, you are powerful both financially and politically in fascist countries, sort of like in communist countries, and they're also totalitarian, which means the government has total control over your life. Remember the word total control? They're totalitarian in nature. We are going to go that were fascist during this PowerPoint, but I want to start with really the first fascist government to exist, and it started in Italy. So Italy has been a powerful country for thousands of years, starting with Rome, and then from Rome on, they had kings that ruled over Italy. But during the Great Depression and after uh, World War One, Italy felt like they had no power. Italy felt like the Treaty of Versailles was not good for them, and that they didn't get any of the territory that they thought they would get after World War One, any of the land that they got after World War One, and so people did not like the king. They blamed the king for this failure. And then during the Depression, people had no money, so they also blamed the king for not having money, which would lead to them looking for somebody to take over the government. The guy who ended up doing so was named Benito Mussolini, who you can see in the picture to the left. Um, he literally said, I'm not making this up, that he wants to make Italy great again. I know we hear our president say stuff like this. I am not calling our president a fascist. I do not believe that at all. But he had this same idea, or not same idea, but a similar idea that we need to make Italy powerful and strong and great. And so he created a organization or a group of people called the Fascist Party, and he pledged that he is going to take over the government and give everybody power again, that Italy will be great again. Uh, and then he creates like this group of people to bully people into voting for him. He calls them the black shirts, and the black all through uh, Italy. So what happens is the black shirts basically protest in Rome. which is the capital of Italy. And because of the protests, the king is forced to step down, and the black shirts put Benito Mussolini into power. So as soon as Benito Mussolini gets power, he takes over the whole government. He makes himself a dictator, which means they do whatever he says, and he takes control of the whole economy. So if you owned a farm, the government now owns your farm, and you work for the government. If you owned a factory, the government now owns your factory, and you work for Mr. Mussolini. There are no individual rights. So if you disagree with him, you can't write in the newspaper, hey, Benito Mussolini smells bad, he's a bad dictator, whatever you want to put, you're not allowed to say that. And so he begins to sort of take over the economy and people's way of life. He also makes trains run on time, which sounds really funny to us, but that was a big thing during that time. People used to use the train to go everywhere, and they never knew if it was going to work or not. Because the government was failing, Benito Mussolini makes sure the trains work. People love him for this, but in return, they give up their right to say anything. And so this rise in fascism continues throughout um, all of Europe. One of the most, probably the most famous fascists, which you guys have all heard about and like we all make fun of and stuff like that, is Adolf Hitler. But Adolf Hitler got his ideas from Mussolini. Mussolini really led the way for Adolf Hitler to gain power. So Hitler in the 1920s wasn't really a big political figure. Actually, he was in jail for speaking out against the government, the Republic, at one time. He but in jail he writes his book, and so in this book he explains how the government's been taken over by Jews. I kid you not. He says that the government's been taken over by Jews, and that Jews want to ruin the German people, and so Germans need to stand up and create a new form of government. He said that it would be the third rise of Germany. That Germany will be great again for the third time. He calls it the Third Reich. Um, and that they would create this fascist government, which he would call Nazism, or the Nazis. So when we say Nazi, that's what we're referring to, is the fascist government in Germany. So he writes his book called Mein Kampf, explaining his beliefs on Germany and his fascist ideas, and he says that Germany has used to have a ton of land, and they lost all their land during World War One, which is true. Um, and so the way that they are going to gain their power back is by taking back their land um, in Europe. He said that they needed living space, or Lebensraum, which is the way to say it in German, but they need living space in order to gain power. Um, and so during the Great Depression, when the economy collapsed, Hitler gained power and was able to sort of take over Germany. When Hitler takes over Germany, um, he is named what's called a chancellor, which means uh, um, he did not have full power, sort of like a president. So people liked his ideas, but they they said, hey, we're still gonna have like a representative government, sort of like what we have in the United States. Hitler was able to take that over and destroy that. And so because he destroyed it, they turned into a totalitarian state, which means that Hitler had total control over the government. Um, and so he begins to create laws which eliminate the enemies that he has. So if you disagree with Hitler, you either get out of Germany before they can kill you, or you die. Um, Another thing, though, that that happened during this time is that Hitler did not like Jewish people, and so he began to blame the Jewish people for everything that had gone wrong in Germany. And so he creates these laws, which we will go into in about 4 weeks from now. We're going to focus on the Holocaust, but he creates these laws which continue to oppress Jews. One of the most famous and really the beginning of this is called Kristallnacht. What Kristallnacht is basically Hitler tells people to go out at night and just destroy Jewish neighborhoods. So if you had a bakery and you were a Jew, that night your bakery would have been destroyed, or your bank would have been destroyed. They lit houses on fire. They burned people's property, really just to show them that Jews were no longer welcome. Um, Totalitarian dictatorships though spread throughout all of Europe. Really, only Czechoslovakia is the only country in Eastern Europe that does not have a dictator. Um, Even parts of South America, like Argentina, end up having dictators, and this splits the world into really two different sides. You're either in a democracy, um, or you're a totalitarian, which would also include communism. But communism is not fascism. They're different, but they're both totalitarian in that they have one ruler. Um, Now moving out of Europe, on in Asia, Japan saw what was going on in Europe, and there are many people in Japan that wanted to be like Europeans. So, in Japan, the military ended up taking over the country, because and at that time they had like a supreme leader whose family had been in leadership for hundreds of years, and then his like family would also work in the military. So the military was able to sort of gain power that way, um, and so when the military gained power, they had these ideas that the way they were going to make Japan um, richer was by taking over more land. There isn't a lot of natural resources in Japan. They don't have like coal. It's a really small island. If you look in the picture on the left side of your screen, on the top right corner is Japan, those little islands there. Um, as you can tell, there's not much room there. So in order to make money, they had to take over more land, and so they began to do so. Starting in Manchuria, which is also in that map, it's modern day China. Japan was able to take that from China in 1931. Uh, and then it began to take more and more land in China. And by 1937, um, Japan sees that China is in a civil war, which we went over 2 weeks ago. We started on the civil war. Japan sees that they're in a civil war and says, hey, let's take that over. Um, and so this really would lead into World War II in. Yeah. Mussolini, sort of like Japan, says, hey, the way I'm going to gain power in Italy, which is the green boot in the top picture, the right side, that little green boot, that's Italy. He says, is I need to take over land. So in 1935, Mussolini attacks Ethiopia. He tries to take it over. Ethiopia was the only country in Italy that had never been colonized. The Italians tried to attack them before, if you remember that, and they failed last time. So Mussolini tries again in 1935. Um, and this was really the first time that the League of Nations was put to the test, because the League of Nations was supposed to stop this kind of war and extreme takeover. And what does the League of Nations do during this time? They see Ethiopia getting taken over, and basically they write a letter to Mussolini that said, hey, dear Mussolini, please stop. We'd really like it if you stop doing this stuff. Um, I hate to break it to you, but that doesn't work. If I write to a bully and I say, Dear Mr. Bully, please do not beat me up, he's still going to beat me up. So Mussolini, being the bully he was, continued to take over Ethiopia with nobody stopping him. A ton of different uh, fascist countries. They take over land and nobody really stops them because everybody's afraid to go to war. Because they had just gone out of World War One, and so if we go back to war, I have to do this all over again. I'm gonna lose millions of people again. People were afraid to do so, and so they try to do things other than that. That didn't work, and we can tell by Hitler um, sort of doing the same thing. So in 1935, around the same time, Hitler decides that the way he's going to rebuild Germany is he's going to take over land that used to be German and was no longer a part of Germany. So just below Germany, there's a piece of land called Rhineland. Rhineland spoke German. Rhineland wanted to be a part of Germany. Rhineland used to be a part of Germany, but Rhineland was no longer a part of Germany as a part of Czechoslovakia. And so in 1936, Germany says, "Hey, yo, Rhineland, how about you join us? We're gonna take you over." Um, and so uh, Germany does take over uh, Rhineland, and this scares France, England, and the United States at the time. And so they say, "Hey, yo, Hitler, how about you stop doing this?" The idea was that if we give Hitler a little bit of what he wants, he won't take over everything. So they said, "Hey, you can have Rhineland. Rhineland wanted to be a part of you anyways. You can have Rhineland, but do not take over anything else." Hitler, being Hitler, was like, "Sure, dude, I won't take over anything else. I promise." And guess what he does? He takes over more stuff. Hitler always takes over more stuff. I don't know why people thought over and over again Hitler wasn't going to take over more land, but he did. That's all he wanted to do. And so throughout World War II, we are going to learn that Hitler makes promises to people and he never follows through with them. Do you want to know why? Because he's Hitler. That's why. Hitler doesn't follow through any promise that he makes. So the idea was though that if we appease Hitler, if we give him something called appeasement, then he will follow through on his word. If we give him a little bit, he won't take everything. That's not what happened. Rather, he created an alliance with countries that were taking over other pieces of land because he said, "Hey, you guys are all fascists. Why don't we work together, see if we can take over the world?" I kid you not. He wanted the Axis powers to take over the world. That was sort of his crew or his alliance that he built. They were called the Axis powers. It was Italy, Japan, and Germany. These three countries really wanted to take over the world, and they believed that they um one way that they thought they could take over the world is by funding wars in other parts of the world. If they saw that fascist governments were going to gain power in a country, usually they funded it. One of the biggest examples of this was in Spain. The man up top would become the fascist leader of Spain in 1931. Spain was a republic, but in 1936, there was a general in their army called Francisco Franco who led a rebellion. Franco was looked at people like Hitler and Mussolini and said, "Hey, I can do the same thing." And so he tried to in 1936, and he was basically funded, given money to fight a war to cause fascism in Spain. Um, Franco is able to win this war in Spain, and so now fascism has taken over Germany, Italy, and Spain, expanding its power through Europe. Just before World War II would begin, which sort of begins the world other than the United States. The U.S. did not want to go to war, and so they tried to separate themselves from Europe. The way the United States saw fascism was that, hey, that's a problem that's happening in Europe. I don't have to worry about that. So I'm going to focus on what I do, and I will let Europe focus on what they do. That was their idea. It was called isolationism. Basically, the idea of isolationism is that we are going to avoid war by not becoming allies with anybody. So if I don't connect with anyone, then I don't have to fight a war with them. So the U.S. tried to avoid war through this idea of isolationism. If I'm on my own, if I isolate myself, if I separate myself from everybody else, then I don't have to go to war. So in 1935, Congress in the United States passed something called the Neutrality Act, which basically meant we are neutral. Whatever goes on in Europe, we are neutral. We don't care. We are on our own side. Unless somebody attacks us, we are not going to deal with Europe's problems. Somebody will attack us, hint, hint, and that causes us to have to deal with this. But before that, we did not want anything to do with. Hitler continued to expand. Remember, we said that he took over Rhineland, which, if you look in the photo, is the green little like blob on the left side. Below Germany, in that little like weird circle thing next to Czechoslovakia, that is like a lighter tan, is Sudetenland. Um, Sudetenland was sort of like Rhineland, only they had never been a part of Germany, but Germany felt like they deserved to have them, and so um, Hitler, in the same year, 1936, decides that if nobody's gonna stop me um, from taking over land, then I'm gonna take over more land. So Hitler continues to take over land. He takes over student land from Czechoslovakia. This really angered Czechoslovakia, and they said, "Hey, excuse me, you can't do that." And Hitler said, "Huh, stop me." Nobody stopped him. So the Czechs asked France for help. France once again told Germany, "Hey, take over that land. We'll let you take it over, but if you do it again, we're gonna get mad." Basically, the world does this to Hitler over and over again. He takes over more and more land, and people say, "Hey, don't take over any more land, or we're gonna beat you up." And Hitler's like, "Okay, I'm sorry, I won't take over any more land." And then he takes over more land. He does it over and over again, and this will lead to World War II. Um, Much like before, when leaders see what happened in Germany, they try to make Hitler stop taking over land in a peaceful way. So instead of going to war, they decide to meet together at a thing called the Munich Conferences in 1938. So in 1938, all of of European countries, including England, France, Czechoslovakia, Germany, Italy, get together and they say, "Hey, um, let's create a treaty that says we won't take over any more land." So Hitler says, "All right, sure, I'll sign this treaty in 1938." Um, so in 1938, he says, "All right, I will not take over any more land. I pinky promise." And the next year, 1939, Hitler takes over Czechoslovakia, and the whole world's like, "Whoa, time out! You just said you're not going to take over any more land." Hitler's like, "I'm sorry, bro. What had happened was, I don't know," and he just takes over more land. So does Mussolini. Mussolini takes over Albania. Hitler takes over parts of Poland. Literally, right after signing a treaty where the whole world thought they had created peace again, these countries take over more. Our last slide. Hitler realizes that one of his biggest threats in Europe is Stalin. Stalin led the giant Russian Empire. Um, and he knew that Stalin could probably beat him in war. So Stalin didn't like Hitler. They weren't like best friends, but he liked what Hitler was doing. He liked the idea of taking over more land. So what Hitler does is he goes to Stalin and says, "Hey man, I want to take over land. You want to take over land. Let's make a deal. If you let me take over land, then I'll let you take over land, and then we can split Europe in half, and together we can have our own like little countries that we take over." So they signed a treaty called the Non-Aggression Pact, which means that if I don't fight you, you won't fight me. It's really sort of like a dumb pact though, because both of them will end up fighting each other. Both of them end up extremely disliking each other. But in 1939, they agreed to not kill each other, which is where we are going to end off today. The whole world is getting taken over by Mussolini and Hitler and Japan. Everybody else is trying to act like it's not happening and trying to make treaties to stop it, but it doesn't do so well. So thank you so much for watching this video. Please fill out your PowerPoint guides that I gave to you on Friday. I appreciate you guys. I hope you have a great week. If you need anything, let me know. Have a good day, and I will see you guys on Friday.